So Bogdan, are you presenting instead of Sophie then?
Okay, well, we will find out at the end of the talks who will present the last paper. It will be a cliffhanger for everybody. Welcome to this session, which is the Software Engineering and Society session. We have mostly software engineering and society papers being presented here, but also an education paper from the SEAT Trek. And I'm Kelly Blinker from the University of Auckland, and I'm just going to jump right into the session. So we have a set of 6 very exciting papers. The first one is on academic and industry training for data modeling, and it's from the SEAT Trek, and the presenter is Daria. So Daria, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just one moment, I will share my presentation so that please tell me if you can see it. Yeah. Can you see it?
Yes, looks perfect.
Okay, perfect. So we have a mixed authorship between Sitecore, which is an IT company some of you might know, and University of Leuven, which is located in Belgium. And we are very lucky that we have this opportunity because it's quite rare that we can have this mix of academic and industry approach at the same time. So I'm going to quickly tell you about some ideas that we have for academic and industry training collaboration. So usually academia and industry are viewed as entirely different worlds when it comes to software engineering education, and university level software engineering programs often fail to provide, unfortunately, the students with the skills that are viewed as necessary. So we have a certain knowledge gap between academia and industry when our students finish the bachelor's or master's and they jump into the world of industry. They have to jump quite a serious length to reach their industry level standards and the skills that are in the industry. So there is a very substantial difference in approaches to education. There is a difference in desired and covered skills. So the skills desired by the industry and the skills covered in academia. So we anyway have to onboard people after they have spent 4 to 6 years in education. So that's quite unfortunate. And overall, we have a problem of lack of communication between industry and academia. This is applicable everywhere, not only in software engineering education. I think you will find this problem in all sorts of places, but I think in software engineering education, this is very prominent. So the question is, can we safely assume that industry training successfully covers the knowledge gap between the academia novice students and alumni and industry skills that are needed? The intuitive answer is yes. Yes, that professionals, they are more experienced and had a chance to practice their skills in various tasks and during onboarding, so they have a lot of training. In reality, no. In reality, the knowledge gap sometimes is still there even after years of industry training. What we find also in terms of the research in the field of conceptual data modeling that I am most interested in, errors that are made by students are studied extensively. There are a lot of papers on that. There is a large interest in the academic community. Yeah, I did my PhD partially on that as well. So there is loads of information already about the errors in conceptual data modeling, but errors made by professionals are still a mystery. Everyone is focusing on students because, of course, it's an easier audience to target, but professionals are a little bit of an enigma. What errors do they make? So we tried to address that. We explored 2 courses on conceptual data modeling. master level course at the university with the platform Merlin. It's a platform for conceptual data modeling education, and industry professional training at Sitecore with Sitecore Content Hub, which is a quite widely used digital asset management platform. And we compared a little bit our approaches and compared what kind of errors students make and our trainees make in these two completely different contexts. So yeah, these trainings can be quite different. So industrial training is short-term, academic is long-term. Final evaluation is the certification exam for both. Sandboxes, so they have practical implementation, is available for both courses. Industry implementation, of course, only for industrial course. In academia, that's quite rare that you have it. And the target role that this person will be working in is clear in the industrial setting, and it's not clear in the academic setting. So these are the key differences that we will also probably find with many industrial and academic courses that we should pay attention on. And the topics that were included are requirements analysis, conceptual data model draft design, behavioral model design, and finally, the evaluation of the results. So we had a tangible result that we could test, that we could, we had a code generator for the students that they could apply the real model. And at the end, we explored the mistakes that the students made.
Daria, sorry to interrupt you. You've gone over the 5 minutes now, so if you could just very quickly tell us.
I will very quickly. So the most important thing is that common errors were exactly the same. The most common errors were exactly the same. Associated multiplicity errors, wrong direction of associations. So doesn't matter whether you are an experienced professional or a novice student, we have exactly the same problems. So that's why I advocate for the unified error identification system, finding the overlaps in errors in professionals and novices, and evaluate the treatments in both target groups, and finally exchange the methodology between the academic and the industry training.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Daria. Now we're going to move right on to the next presentation. So if Miriam could get ready. So Daria, if you could stop sharing your screen. But in the meantime, we will be having a discussion and a Q&A at the end of all of the presentations. So feel free to ask questions in the chat to Daria. If you could just prepend your question with Daria's name so that she knows that it's targeted for her. And then we'll have an open Q&A and discussion after all of the talks. So the next talk is from the CEASE track, and this is on attracting and retaining open source software contributors through the use of a maintainer dashboard. So over to you, Miriam.
Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everyone. So today I'll be presenting our paper, Attracting and Retaining OSS Contributors with a Maintainer Dashboard. This paper was part of my research internship at Microsoft, summer 2021, and more specifically the Saintis group. So I'll go ahead and dive into it. So first off, attracting and retaining new contributors is challenging, and there has been previous work that has focused on solutions to help newcomers specifically. For example, through a mentoring program like Google Summer of Code, or like the Outreachy program, or through some platforms that help newcomers get into a project. In this paper, however, we focus on the other side of the coin. So we focus on empowering maintainers to be intentional about attracting and retaining new contributors. However, while doing this, we want to keep in mind that maintainers' time is limited, and they have to struggle between switching between tasks that are technical tasks, community tasks, and also try to keep the project vision alive. So how can we help these maintainers create a healthy, sustainable community around their project without overwhelming them even more? To do this, we leverage prior literature to help brainstorm and prioritize the recommendations that we want to include in our dashboard. We also work closely with GitHub teams who communicate regularly with OSS participants. The resulting dashboard design was then customized to each one of the maintainers that we interviewed, and we got their feedback on how they would use this dashboard. We then did qualitative analysis to summarize the maintainers' feedback. So I'll just go right into some of our results. So the community growth recommendation, which is the part of the dashboard that would help retain new contributors, looked like this. And here our goal was to recognize active newcomers. To do this, we wanted to give some context to the maintainers. So we wanted to give them an overall view of the trends of their newcomers. So the joining trends, the activity trends, and the retention trends. So how many contributors have joined, and per month, how many were active and how many were retained from the previous month. We also identified and recognized newcomers with a Rising Contributor badge. So we provide some of the top newcomers that have been active in the project, and we recommend recognizing them with this Rising Contributor badge. So now diving into the recognition of active newcomer a little bit more closely. So here, when you're a newcomer, this badge recognition could be a small thing, but it could make a big difference in terms of feeling appreciated and motivated to continue to contribute. And this is particularly important as these newcomers are the future of the project and potentially could turn into core contributors further along the road, or even maintainers that could help take on some of the maintaining tasks. And so this was appreciated by the maintainers as a way to recognize their newcomers, but they also gave some feedbacks in terms of this being dependent on the contribution model. For instance, in a more hybrid OSS ecosystem where both paid and unpaid contributors coexist, it's important to distinguish between the two and help maintainers recognize them accordingly. So to do this, maintainers suggesting add in a filter by team membership. So being able to see the newcomers that are volunteering or more that are volunteering for the project versus newcomers that are being paid. They also, these maintainers thought of a way of using this that we didn't actually think about at first, is to use this as a hiring mechanism and be able to detect these newcomers that are highly active in the community and end up hiring them to be part of the project full time. Now, looking more in depth into what these cards represent. So in this dashboard, we made sure that we are not only looking at code contributions, but also at creating issues as well. And this was well received by maintainers as it captured both people that were coding for the project and also people that were using the project. For the overall activity, the maintainers thought that this would help them understand that the community is growing, but they also thought of a different use for it. Again, is to use this to understand the effect of events and hackathons, and also to measure the success of these events and hackathons in attracting and retaining newcomers. So overall, maintainers are really overworked and resource constrained, which is detrimental to the health and sustainability of OSS projects. But we as researchers can help by identifying mechanisms to help them attract and retain new contributors, and even identify potential future maintainers to delegate work to. As we can see, this work was very well received by GitHub. They actually implemented a version of it for the discussion insights. And so if you have any suggestions or ideas about how we can help maintainers sustain their community, I'd love to discuss this topic further and get your feedback. So thank you very much for listening.
Great, thanks so much, Miriam. And again, please ask questions in the chat. It turns out if you push a question, it will ask a specific question. So thank you very much for that interesting talk. The next talk is going to be by Anita on gender inclusive job ads. And this is also from the CEASE track.
Getting there, 1 second. All right, can you see my talk? Cool. So hi, everyone. I'm Anita Sarma at Oregon State University, and I'm presenting this amazing work, which was done by my collaborators in Monash University. But since it's 2 a.m. in the morning, I am presenting it here. So our work is, okay, it moves by itself. So before we start on the work, they would like to acknowledge the elders of their country, as well as acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations, who were the traditional owners of the land on which Monash University is located. So what is this talk about? The talk is about how can we have more inclusive job ads. And it has been known very much that teams that are diverse perform better, are productive, do better financially. However, software engineering workforce is typically very much male dominated. And the way that job ads themselves are designed could be adding to this imbalance. Current word-based approaches that are meant to help with debiasing job ads might not be suitable in the context of software engineering. For example, one of the words is analysts, or coming from analysis, which is said to be male dominated, which is not true. It's a job role at this point. So to address this, how to remove this bias, we started looking for a way, and of course from GenderMag, which is a method to debias software interfaces. This method uses 3 personas and relies on 5 facets of problem solving. The individual differences are shown statistically to cluster by gender. And the method then uses these personas to perform a cognitive walkthrough of the software and detect any kind of gender biases, which we call inclusivity bugs. So we came up with an approach that is inspired by GenderMag. Since we could not apply GenderMag verbatim, because job application requires much more than problem-solving activities. It also requires what kind of job or career goals one have. So we first did a survey to identify what factors influence job application behavior. In the survey, we got 44 responses, and from open-ended text, we categorized them into 10 factors, which we then further classified into 3 facets: SE views, career goals, and job application behavior. From these factors, we came up with the 2 personas, Abby and Tim, on 2 ends of the spectrum. The highlights for Abby, I'm going to talk about just 3 here. For example, is when looking for a job, Abbies would not like to have an overlarge or unfair workload. They're looking for managerial opportunities and financial security. And when they're reading the job application, they read job advertisements in full and find all the information needed. So they're comprehensive information processors. Tims, on the other hand, would like to improve their routine, enhance the technology, and overcome short-term challenges. They are looking for leadership opportunities. And when they apply for jobs, they read job advertisements selectively, potentially missing some critical information. So we took these factors and created them into these 2 personas, combining these factors into these 3 facets. So this is a new facet that we have created. We wanted to validate the facet, and we did a survey with 17 participants. And on 5 factors, participants either related to Tim or Abby, but there were other 5 factors where they were neither Tim nor Abby. They were like, in between. We then wanted to do the cognitive walkthrough. So what we did, we took the facets, both Tim and Abby, and the researchers performed a cognitive walkthrough on selected job ads. And we also gave these job ads to some software engineering candidates to also review. When comparing the inclusivity bugs that were identified through the cognitive walkthrough that the researchers did, we found on 2 job ads that Tim and Abby had differing views. And then we compared the results listed for each step of the cognitive walkthrough with what the human participants said. We found in more than 50% cases that the errors matched. So implication for practices, this is a first step, but it can be a step to also systematically investigate and debias job ads. And just saying we are inclusive, the statements are not enough, we need to actually go deeper, look for what is the importance of software engineering roles, or how men and women differ, how they read ads, and therefore create more inclusive job ads. And GenderMag is easy to use and learn. And I invite you all to help and do better, make our research better, validate the facets more. And this is it. Questions?
Thank you very much, Anita. Okay, now again, ask questions in the Q&A on the chat. The next talk is going to be by Annika, and it's on open data inclusion through narrative approaches. Over to you, Annika.
Hey, I hope you can see my screen.
Looks good.
Okay, yes, so I'm presenting. I also have two co-authors, Natasha Tilosky and Tanvir Hassan, who very kindly provided me this colourful slide template. So I'm going to give a brief kind of synopsis of this talk to set the context. And my interest is mainly around open data and how open data can be used to empower people, and especially how it could be used to empower communities. And it's intended for everybody to use, but the problem is that not everyone can use it. And there are quite many barriers against its use. So in this talk, I'm going to look a little bit about what these barriers are, and then think about how to overcome them and make the data more inclusive. And in doing this, I'm going to talk about a proposed narrative approach to structuring data that will hopefully reduce the gap between how the data is described and the types of questions that people want to ask of it and the ways in which they can ask those questions. So I won't go over all the barriers, but I've identified a few that I think are really critical. And I think one of them is that there's a lot of hidden imperfections in open data, and actually people don't know necessarily that there's no visibility over this. So I think it was Melanie Feinberg who made the point that data is actually biased from the moments it's collected, because decisions are made about who it's going to be collected about, or where it's going to be collected, what areas get covered, what areas don't get covered. And in that decision-making process, there are potential biases that are introduced into the data set that then are going to impact how the data can be used in the future. If you're very close to the data collection, then you will have some view about what those biases are and can potentially mitigate against them. But if you are using open data somewhere down the line, then you probably have no idea. So there's aspects related to the description of data sets that are often missing and mean that they can't really be utilized. And then the open data portals themselves, they have lots of issues. So for example, you know, if you even know where to go to find the data, you get to the open data portal and start searching, then it's not always very easy to find or to use the filters or the search boxes unless you know what you're looking for and have already a good strategy of how to use such portals. So people that have less technical skills may actually struggle with that. And then even when the data is returned, the information doesn't really help people very much to identify if it's relevant. So the teasers that we get in Google from a Google search, they can often help us to find out very quickly, does this match what I was searching for, and if not, to move on to the next thing. But there's quite a lot that needs to be done with the data set sometimes to even be able to judge that. And then often you can't really find data very easily and that you weren't looking for. There's no kind of serendipity around it. So often if you're looking for particular data sets, you want to go and find something about noise pollution, you find something about noise pollution, but there could actually be something better that you don't know that you need. And the open data portals, they don't really support these kinds of serendipitous discovery. And then, as mentioned, you know, people don't always have the technical skills needed to navigate through all of these challenges. So there's lots of different approaches that could improve this situation. I look at one in particular and have lots of projects that are looking at this from various angles about how narratives can maybe help. And you know, people are narrative thinkers, so from a very early age, children start to think and tell stories, or think in stories and tell stories. So it's something that's very natural to people. So in starting this work, I've created a kind of conceptual framework. I can't go through the whole thing in this short time, but essentially the idea is that we can utilize narrative theory, and narrative theory says that narratives are constructed from events that are bound by a particular time and place. They have certain theme and they have characters, and we can use these kinds of attributes to describe data sets, and this will allow us to identify narratives which are similar data sets based on overlap of some of these attributes and features. So for example, stories take place in a particular time and place with these themes and characters. If you move too far away from a particular setting, but it's still about the same theme and characters, then it could be related, but you're losing coherence all the time. So you need to have overlap amongst these. So you can use these principles to identify similarity of data sets, and then you can refine your narrative scope by widening or narrowing this setting, theme, and characters that you're interested in. So these principles can be used to both describe and inform search engines for data. And then when you choose a particular viewpoint across the data, when you choose which parts of data sets and which aspects you're going to talk about, and you actually could convey that through a particular media, then we're talking about data storytelling. So to make this happen, we have to think a bit more carefully about how we describe and provide data through open data portals and the tools that people can use. So we need better tools for describing, for merging data sets, for calculating the proximity according to these narrative principles, and then we can build recommenders from the data.
And then, sorry to interrupt, but you're at the 5-minute mark now, so if you could just wrap up quickly.
Yeah. So then if we do this, we can support, for example, NLP search, and then better data discovery. And it's just an example to end of some tools that have been built around these ideas. So on the left, there's some data comics, interactive data comics, and on the right, there is a data explorer that's using these principles. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Ineke. And now, while Bianca gets ready to present, I will just introduce the next talk. So the next talk is on challenges faced by women in the software industry. And this paper won the award in the Software Engineering and Society track. And Bianca will be doing the presentation today. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Bianca Trinkenreich. Thank you, Kelly, for the introduction. This work was done in collaboration with Ericsson from Ricardo Brito. And Marco and Igor are here also as my advisors and co-authors. So women represent less than 24% of software employees and experience many types of bias. Ericsson is a company that invests and also believes in diversity and inclusion. So we worked together on a project to hear from women who are software developers about the challenges they face, the reasons that caused other women to leave, and their suggestions to increase numbers of women in the company. The goal of the project was to help the company to leverage those efforts to increase women, but based on the employees' lived experience. We sent an online questionnaire that was answered by 94 women. We used mixed methods to analyze the data, and demographics were collected to segment analysis of the challenges. The questions were all optional. The sample mirrored the company's numbers, and most of the respondents were from India, aging less than 10 to 35 years old. They were married, living with children, having more than 10 years experience in the software industry, and having less than 5 years working in Ericsson. We found 8 categories of challenges. Besides the work-life balance issues, both hostile and benevolent sexism were mentioned, as hostility in comments during technical discussions, but also being pampered, never being given a hard, straight feedback, and being included only because they are women, not because of their skills and capacity. Women mentioned also receiving no praise, no recognitions, and their results were usually evaluated as okay, but never as excellent. Women feel isolated and excluded from discussions. And the failures are easily personalized and bringing feelings of imposter syndrome. Well, not receiving the same salary of a man in the same position, having less opportunities to ladder the career, and also trying to achieve more things, women are called as ambitious in a negative way. So this brought a problem of glass ceiling. They need to be supervised while working in an important task. Also not having those important tasks, working harder to achieve the same as a man, showing competence all the time and need to be 100% right. It brought like the prove it again bias. We also, women also mentioned that some mothers are treated differently only because they have kids, receiving less work, and the worst, sometimes they are needing to step down a lower position after returning from maternity leaves. I marked with the asterisks the challenges that were also mentioned as a reason to leave. So the strategies. Embrace equality was claimed by participants to mitigate most of the challenges like maternity wall, provider games, sexism, lack of recognition, and glass ceiling. By supporting the career growth, women mentioned that the company can also help women to break the glass ceiling and promoting women to leadership to help younger talents to feel more confident and continue the career in the company. Interesting having the Anita talk before, because hiring more women was also mentioned by women, but also creating a little bit different job opportunities process and also the recruitment process. So invest in marketing, create more part-time positions, be transparent about the required skills, showcase how the company support women growth, and have some base level actions as programs to attract girls to STEM and be active in social media. The feeling of imposter syndrome can be mitigated by empowering and also having support groups for interaction between women from different departments, because some departments have almost not any women. So targeting empowerment can also be fostered by recognition, sharing the success of stories in success stories of Ericsson women, and rewarding achievements. The work-life balance issue could be helped by sabbatical, like paid leave, were suggested to promote well-being, discouraging extra hours for everyone, creating process to see flexibility when needing to move to another location, and also some parenthood support going besides the parenthood support that the country provides. So we noticed that some problems surpass the organization gates and are related to local culture of the employees and managers. There are also problems that go beyond and bump into society that many times contributes to this cultural legacy that we see. However, there is also always space for improvement in the organization, and Ericsson is committed to implementing the suggestion changes to mitigate the challenges. While attaining the promotion to leadership is not easy, to break the glass ceiling, serving in a high position can be even harder, and also lacking the support of authority to accomplish the goals. So it's not only breaking the glass ceiling, but having support to be in the leadership. Having other women to inspire, to encourage, and to mentor can help to address that. Some topics could be emphasized in training, such as speaking up on behalf of women, which is disrespected in meetings. Some suggestions are already in place. Ericsson plans to raise awareness about those that maybe women are not aware of, and they complain about that, and also have additional actions that can complement the suggestions in place. Sexism is something that is not tolerated, is an unacceptable behavior to Ericsson. And then the managers are already started to have collective meetings with the teams to spread this message and make it clear. Following this, the company is planning to have recurrent meetings to plan strategies based on the findings that we have, and also even having the commitment to diversity inclusion. Women are still perceiving challenges and are calling for change. And this is the main takeaway of this paper. There is still a long work ahead for the company, for the software industry, for us as a society to create a more diverse and inclusive environment. We hope and really hope that our results will enlighten actions towards reducing the perceived challenges and increasing awareness about the hurdles imposed to women, and which never negatively influence the diversity in the software industry. I thank you very much to all the women who made their voices heard by us. I thank you for the great reviews that I received, and it's because of the reviewers that I had this award, and I congratulate all the other authors of this track, which had amazing papers. Thank you. This is a slide for discussion if we have after comparison with open source.
Thank you, Bianca. Okay, and we have our final paper in this session, which is on detecting interpersonal conflicts in issue and code review. And Bogdan is here, but he's going to see if he can play Sophie's video that she's prepared because she is unable to join us.
Yeah, unfortunately, that happened last minute, so sorry about this. She really wanted to be here. Sends her apologies via me. I'm here for Q&A and discussion. I just wanted to give her the platform and have her presentation instead of mine. So let's see if that works.
Kelly, do you know if you can like download the questions or something? Because you have a lot of interesting questions. I'm not sure if you can follow through all, and I would love to answer them. But last session it just disappeared.
Paolo, could you look into that for us? Is there a way to download questions?
I can just copy paste, I guess, but yeah.
Kelly, I'm getting some computer glitches here with my browser. Any chance you could play the video?
I can try.
Right.
I'm Sophie from Carnegie Mellon University. I'm presenting our paper, Detecting Interpersonal Conflict.
I'm a little bit worried that it's going to be like a recursive look here. Let's see. Is that coming through? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, that looks good. That looks just like the video.
Conflict in issues and code review, cross-pollinating open and closed source approaches. As a social-technical activity, software development involves communication that are not always healthy. One study found that free and liberal open source software communities are such a rich source of insulting or profane speech data. Negative communication experience can be discouraging, especially to marginalized groups such as women and newcomers. Automatic detection can help with prevention and mitigation. For example, Stack Overflow uses a bot to flag unwelcoming comments, and there are some tools by Google and other research groups. But off-the-shelf tools don't always work well in software engineering. Some of the reasons include technical jargon, word contractions, emoticons, URLs, and code snippets. One example is that in real life, kill and execute might mean something similar, but it is not the case in software engineering. Therefore, kill the process is an ordinary command and it's not coming from Queen of Hearts. There are several tools developed independently in software engineering, for example, sentiment analysis, anger detector, toxicity detector, and pushback detector. Our work expands on the paper by Raman and colleagues and the one by Eggleman and colleagues. We chose these two works because they were the most recent when we started this study, and they're different along several axes. One is across contexts. Raman's paper works in the context of open source, whereas Eggleman's paper situates in a corporate setting. Also across types of communication, Raman's work focuses on issue discussions, whereas Eggleman's work focuses on code review. Also across concepts, Raman's paper centers around the concept of toxicity, which is defined as a rude, disrespectful, or unreasonable comment. Whereas Eggleman's paper uses the concept of pushback, which is defined as the perception of unnecessary interpersonal conflict in a code review, while reviewer is blocking a change request. Also across methods, Raman's paper uses text-based features to build a classifier, whereas Eggleman's paper uses logs-based features to build a classifier. We have several research questions. For example, can we cross-apply the methods? How much can a toxicity detector classify pushback? Can these tools work across contexts? And finally, can we combine them? The short answer is yes to some of them, and for more details and the rest of research questions, please read our paper. We encountered several challenges along the way. For example, we need to construct new datasets to bridge the two prior works. We also need to refine the features. For example, we can't replicate all features from Google, and we have to use approximations. Now I'm going to present some result highlights. We retrained the text-based classifier for issues on code reviews. We see a lower performance, although both are quite good. We have some speculations, and please read our paper to find out. We apply them across contexts. We retrain the log space classifier for corporate code review on open source code review. Again, we see a lower performance. It may be because we can't replicate all features and we need to use approximation. When applying across methods, we apply both the text and log space classifier on toxicity. The result shows that a text-based classifier performs better when detecting toxicity, suggesting that toxicity is mainly about the use of inappropriate language. We apply both the text and the log space classifiers to detect pushback in corporate code review. We found that a text-based classifier works better. This implies that although pushback was initially defined as a delay in code review, there's more nuance in the language. There are still many open questions, such as how to improve the classifiers, how to expand the datasets, which are now quite small, and how can we perform prevention. In summary, in this work, we works across several axes. We overcame several challenges along the way, including datasets and features. I highlighted some results here, and please read the paper for more. The results have many implications on future research directions and open questions. To learn more about this study, please scan the QR code for the full presentation and read our paper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sophie, in your absence. So thank you to all of the presenters. I'm going to jump right into the discussion because we've got lots of questions up in the chat. So I'm going to go with Daria first, who did the first presentation, and I'm going to try to ask a kind of joint question because we might only get to one question per presenter. So Daria, can you tell us a little bit about the types of errors that you saw, the errors that you were investigating and the reasons potentially for those errors? And going into Alexander's questions, could there be any notation issues there that existed?
Yeah, sure. So the errors are actually conceptual from the requirements interpretation. So they are rooted in requirements interpretation and into the abstracting of the real world into the more formalized language. It doesn't matter which. So this is the moment where it goes wrong. And the most common mistakes are the multiplicity. So people understand that, okay, what is the difference between one-to-many and many-to-many, and they mistake one for another, especially in case of insufficient requirements, insufficient information in the requirements. And we see this pattern throughout scientific literature as well. So in other modeling languages as well, this is one of the most common mistakes. And it doesn't matter if you are a novice modeler, and I see in my trainings, I'm a technical trainer, I see very experienced software engineers who still make the same mistakes because, yeah, it takes a certain skill to train before you can do it without a mistake. And apparently it's not very well taught at the university and throughout corporate training.
That work can inspire lots of future studies around this. Let's move on to Miriam. So Miriam, you had a couple of different types of questions. So one was, have you considered no code contributions in terms of the dashboard? But then another one that was a bit of a contrasting question from Bogdan was, what if the maintainers don't really want to attract new contributors? So I'll let you respond to those two.
Yes, those are very good questions. The first one about, about the non-code contribution. So one of the things we looked at first was to also get the issues. So people, when they contribute by just creating issues, we also considered that. And this was as a way to also see, like these projects were open source for social good projects. So there were people that were actually using the projects. So we wanted to also see who was using the project and putting in some bug reports or some feature requests as well. So that was one way of a non-code contribution. But we're also, this is like a first step towards this dashboard. We're also still looking into how we can collect this data, because this is also data that's kind of more challenging to get, the non-code contributions. Like what about speakers, like event speakers are talking about the project and advocating for it? What about people that are doing those like meetings or weekly meetings to talk to the community. So all these are not seen on GitHub, and sometimes when we mine data, we don't get that. So we're trying to think of different ways to get these from different channels and incorporate them. And for Bogdan's questions, could you please remind me of that? I can scroll a bit.
Bogdan's question was around, what if people don't want to actually attract new contributors?
Yes, so that is a very valid question. We saw it in the interviews where there was this maintainer where most of the contributors, and actually pretty much all the contributors in that project, were paid contributors. So this maintainer was not necessarily aware of even the need to attract or retain contributors because they were paid, so they were there. But what he mentioned is that they would have some drive-by contributors sometimes, like they would have some volunteer contributors. And they were thinking, okay, if I see this and if I see this newcomer being constantly contributing, I would want to hire that person right away. I want more in my team. So there was that aspect. And I think from just the open source becoming more and more hybrid and companies are getting involved, this is going to be something to consider when building a dashboard.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's
and I think your question, Kelly, was about...
We don't have time to address all of the questions in this round, so we'll come back to you if there's time. Anita, you had quite a few questions around the domain. Is this a software engineering specific problem? The types of job ads?
That's very interesting. So I think, as Andrea was asking, like, can this go from software engineering job ads, which is what we looked at, analyst, programmer, tester, and project manager? Quite a few, I think, should translate to CS. I think that is an easy translation because many of them are like leadership positions, career goals, those are translatable. Technical movements probably is also. But how to actually translate them to faculty jobs or PhD ads, right? That I think is a little bit of a bigger jump, but we should do that, right? I have struggled with it individually. I was in the job committee, hiring committee, and the words we put are like mostly lip service. Oh, great life-work balance. It doesn't seem to make it, right? And it's on the first blurb. When I read it, I'm like, yeah, text, and then move on, right? So I think we need to do something, and I think it's really crucial. But I have no clue how to do that. So I am looking for how to actually expand on like the PhD ads, our students and our faculty. I think it's a bigger jump and I don't have the right answer, but because some of those things don't match. So I think doing another survey with faculty candidates would be a great place to start and come up with our facets. So that would be, it's a no answer. So yes and no.
That's still a good place to start with the facets that you've developed. Okay, so Annika, I think Igor has asked a question around kind of cross-disciplinary work. And so he was wondering, how can you think about guidelines that can cross these different discipline areas? Do you have anything in response to that question?
Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult question. That's one reason why I work a lot with open data portals, because whilst different disciplines may have different approaches, once you start to make data open through portals, then it starts to converge. There are underlying best data standards, there's technologies that are commonly used, and it's quite easy to see how these narrative principles can be integrated into existing practice, and just to improve the use of open data portals, for example, through the use of recommender tools that use narrative principles, or improving the match between the search box, which often is where, I mean, I work a lot with the communities and people are not data experts, and we've done research that shows that they gravitate towards the search box and they don't use the filters to search, but they don't always get a very good result. But these narrative principles can be used to improve the relevance of the research results based on what they're likely to put there. So I think maybe I went slightly off track, but basically there are still challenges to be worked out. And of course, data itself comes in many different formats, and people have been looking at that problem forever. And I mean, I'm just talking about a middle layer that helps people to discover the data and find out more about what it's about, which can then reduce the time it takes for them to find good data.
Great, thank you. And Bianca, you had some questions around were there differences between the Indian and non-Indian respondents? And then also, are you planning to do any more work in this area? Are you going to follow up and see if the initiatives that you've proposed in your paper are being implemented and if they're successful?
So still in Ericsson, we are following up with the company about the strategies and the plans they are doing. We, for instance, we don't have a plan to replicate the survey and run it again yet, because the strategies are still in place. But then we may possibly investigate deeper those challenges, what are causing them. So we are going to relate those with motivations. We also belonging sentiment and some other factors. And we are going to replicate this work in other 2 companies that invited us. And regarding the India, most of the respondents, which is mirroring the company numbers, most of the respondents, 65% more or less, are from India. And they reported all the categories of challenges. So we didn't segment the analysis per country. Because of this majority of India, we segmented by other demographics. But no, we didn't have this like difference for India. And was there any other? And then, oh, yes. And Bogdan asked, what are the strategies that are already in place? The company is already doing, like, publishing the stories of successful women in media. And this is like attacking 2 different strategies. So this is empowering women who are there. And this is also helping to attract more women. So the media is like carefully thought about how to attract, where to publish, and then achieve women who are in the market. Did I answer everything?
Thank you, Bianca. Yes, that's great. And the last question that I'm going to read off, and then I'm hopefully going to open it up because we will have a few minutes left to anyone that wants to unmute and ask the authors the questions themselves. So this one's to Bogdan. And so this is around toxicity. And if you saw any differences across the different open source software projects and the communities and how they perceive toxicity.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We did. I think it's fair to expect differences in variation at all levels, ranging from the individual. Maybe Kelly and I might disagree whether something is toxic, to higher levels like entire communities or ecosystems. And we did some analysis looking loosely at programming languages as communities and projects within those languages. And we saw, varying levels even at that granularity. So I think overall, yes. But at the same time, we're going to say, if you ask humans to rate these comments as potentially toxic or not, the inter-rater agreement between people tends to be reasonably high. So, even though you will see variation at all of these levels, I think by and large, probably, over enough people, you'll see that people agree that, something is, maybe unprofessional or inappropriate in that context. So I think you can expect some consensus at least.
Thank you, Bogdan.
I have a follow-up question for Bogdan. So this is truly interesting, right? And what I am interested to understand is, like, there is direct toxicity in S**T. I'm looking at infographics right now, but then there is also just rudeness and talking down, the more nuanced versions, right? How would you try to get to that?
That's kind of what motivated us to do this work. The hate speech style toxicity is probably the easiest, because that was probably the one that's most detectable by existing tools. The ones that are hard to do are the ones that are really subtle, and the ones that aren't maybe even linguistic, that are more about, I don't know, sort of unreasonable requests or things like this that are otherwise phrased in a neutral way, but so it's the content of the request that makes them inappropriate. So I think that's the challenge here, is sort of figuring out, if we want to have any impact with automation and interventions and moderation and things like this in an automated way. I think that's where the effort should go, is sort of figuring out the hard cases.
Right. It's like when there's an avalanche of just small things, like drive-by comments, and people are commenting even when they are not in your immediate team. So I don't remember, I think it was Vandana who had looked at that and said like that happens a lot for at least women. That's what she had looked at. So those are the higher ones. Like this is the easy problem, right? The actual toxic word. So I'm interested in that, so we can talk later.
I think the short answer is we do not currently have, and I say we royally, so the global we do not currently have good technology to detect these software engineering specific toxic interactions, quote unquote, that are not the obvious, hate speech style ones. There is nothing currently that can detect these.
Has just made a great point in the chat saying that, even the biases that Bianca was discussing, repeatedly being asked to kind of prove yourself and that kind of thing can be seen as a toxic environment. So how could we kind of push the boundaries and start to be able to detect those things as well? Would anyone else like to turn their video on or unmute and ask questions to the authors?
I think Marco should ask his question.
Marco.
Okay, I'll ask the question for Marco because I know Bianca did some work on that.
Oh yes, I see it.
So you have the biases or the barriers you found in the commercial, and then you have open source with so much work. What's the overlap and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yesterday, let's get it fast. So yesterday, Anita asked about, you showed the challenges faced by women in software industry, and how do they compare to the challenges you have already found that women face in open source? So this is part of the paper, is there in the discussion. So we had a previous work understanding the challenge from literature. We understood the challenges being reported by literature as faced by women in open source. So the yellows are the challenges in open source, and the red are challenges that were found for this study, the current study here. And then what happened? So in open source, we had gender-identified contributions. It's kind of differently than maternity wall and prove it again that we found in this study. I know that there is a previous study in open source showing maternity wall and prove it again from Emerson Murphy. But in case of open source, it's like the bias against contributions. So the bias against contributions from women who have kids, and prove it again by like showing the pull requests with more descriptive ways than those who are not from women. And in the company, maternity wall was positioned as like, I have to step down after having a kid, after returning from maternity leave. They give me less work because they feel that I cannot be able to. And in open source, you don't receive the work, you pick the work. So it's kind of different, but happens in both environments. Stereotyping in the open source was found as like women can only play, for example, community building, community managers cannot be core developers, while in the industry, the glass ceiling was reported as we cannot scale the career. Some of them were quite the same, lack of peer parity, imposter syndrome, and work-life balance issues. They were reported just almost the same for both. And then the last difference was in open source, we have reception issues, like finding a mentor is hard for women because some men understand as an invitation to go out. And in software industry, it was not reported. It's kind of like a different. You don't need to find someone to mentor. Someone is usually already mentoring you and onboarding you in the industry. But the toxic culture mentioned in open source a lot also happened in the software industries, lack of recognitions and a lot of sexism. So yeah, just wanted to share this.
Just to comment, Bianca, like some of the things you're talking about, like open source is volunteer-based, things are shifting a little bit. So Mariam's work with the ASF, which is Apache Source Foundation, which has a lot of employed people, right? We didn't see the stereotype stuff. So there's a shifting landscape-y thing. You should read this paper by Marco Gerosa, I thought.
Thank you. Now, I saw a few comments in the chat on how to find the papers. There are links to preprints to most of the papers. I think I saw Anita saying that one is missing for Annika's paper. So Annika, if you're able to share your preprint, we can get that up in the program so everybody can find your papers. The proceedings will be out soon, I am told. They're on the way. Thank you, everybody, all of the authors, excellent presentations and discussions, and everybody that came and asked questions. Thanks so much. And I'm sure you can find all of the authors in some of the social rooms throughout the conference. Their questions